Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of No One's a Critic. I'm your one of your hosts, Kino, and I'm joined as always by Mac. How you doing this week?
Doing well, Kino. I just actually got a new dishwasher today. Not like I didn't buy it. We rent and it broke, so they had to replace it. But
Was that an
you know,
ordeal
big
to get
things.
that from your landlord, or was it easy?
No, I was just writing it. No, he was pretty chill about it, and I was
Okay,
writing all day, and the maintenance guy was installing it, so it was pretty smooth sailing. Not bad. How about yourself?
nice. Good. I think this week has been, pretty chill. Just working on different projects. I'm watching Mad Men for the first time, so
Nice.
just released my I've been releasing my reactions as I watch them. I just finished the second season, and it's a really great show. I'm really into it so far.
Yeah, Mad Men is a strange animal because on one hand, um, the storytelling, like I obviously it's very reminiscent of The Sopranos, um, but it just like personally doesn't grab me the same way that Sopranos does.
I
Not exactly sure why. It's excellent, but I just
Yeah,
don't personally understand why.
to me, it's like almost as if The Sopranos and The Wire had a baby. Like if you had the kind of slow paced storytelling of The Wire, where it's like not exciting things are not often happening on it. But you had that same kind of like maybe sensibilities as The Sopranos, because Matt Weiner obviously was a writer on The Sopranos, and took a lot of lessons from there. So I can see like the genetic code of both those shows almost on this one. But yeah, I don't know if it's quite at the level of The Sopranos, but it's still really excellent so far, and I've been loving it.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of those things where because Sopranos in general is still very even rewatch. I think that's why I kind of like enjoy rewatching it. It's still
Yeah,
very episodic in
yeah,
general. I mean, there is like the longer storylines, but it is inherently episodic because it was
yeah,
kind of in that transition period from like really heavily serialized television, or sorry, from episodic television into like serialized television. So it kind of was like a mix of both, and I actually kind of like that. But then
oh,
it's
I
something like something like Breaking Bad, where it's just like, I mean, it kind of is episodic a little bit, but for the most part, it's
yeah,
just go, go, go.
I really love that element of The Sopranos, that you can basically turn on any episode anytime and watch it. And yeah, there'll be a few plot points here and there that are from another episode, but for the most part, it was like, this is the episode where Tony's a gambling addict. This is the episode where they're arguing over making a joke about Ginny Sack, right? It's like one thing that the episode's about. And I like that format much more than just like straight serialized, where it's part one of 100, part story, where you have to watch from the beginning, or it's really, you're not going to get the full experience of it.
Exactly, and that's part of the reason why, like, as much as I appreciate it for it and like and how revolutionary it was, that is what at least what they theorized to be the reason why The Wire never really got
Yeah.
the numbers when it was aired because it was such a dense show.
Yeah.
You would watch an episode and then you'd have to wait a week,
Yeah.
and then the episode kind of expect like there was like the last time on, but like with The Wire, you
Yeah.
have to kind of watch the whole episode because
Hmm.
there's so much important stuff. But then of course when it was released on DVD, people could binge them, and then it was like, oh, okay, now I see the merit of it.
But it also had that element too of like, it was a super dense show, but oftentimes it wasn't like explosively exciting like
Mhm.
Breaking Bad was. It was like a lot of shit would happen, but nobody would die or get killed or whatever. Like it would just be political stuff, or commentary on society. So it's like, it's almost like a novel, where it's like it's one part of a much greater thing that is not often going to be. It's rewarding when you get to the end, but you really have to reach that point before all the elements will make sense.
Absolutely. And something interesting to think when we think about this, um, Breaking Bad was notorious for its cliffhanger endings, especially like
Yeah.
in like the last season or like the
Oh
later
yeah.
seasons. It always ended on something like, or like the big one, at least for me, is
Yeah.
the desert fight
Yeah.
when Hank and Jesse, and then it just cuts, and then you're like, oh
Yeah.
my god. Um, which is I'm not doubting. I'm not like putting that down. Like that's one way to go. It's interesting though because now when I rewatch Sopranos, I realize the climax, like the big action, whatever ends up happening, like spoilers, like Tony B's death, um, Jackie Jr.'s death. It always like happens in like the middle of an episode,
Yeah.
and then it's kind of like the aftermath, and then it never
Yeah.
really ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
It kind of ends on like a resolution, which was very interesting. I was like, huh, because a lot of shows nowadays,
Yeah.
especially serialized, they really go with those cliffhangers to try to
Yeah.
get you like next time on. But
Well, I think if you want to tell a really great story, I think oftentimes you need to let the audience kind of like take in what they just saw and let them reflect on it with like
mhm.
a slower pace. Like I the next Breaking Bad log that I'm working on right now is the episode The Fly, or I think it's just called Fly actually.
God, I
It's the
love that
one where it's
episode.
like a bottle episode, and I really like it because I like that it gives the audience a chance to be like, okay, nothing's gonna happen this episode. We're gonna reflect on like everything that's happened up until this point. You can sit with it, you can think about it, and then from there on, it's nonstop action till the end. Like the rest of it's only like 3 more episodes of season 3, and then season 4 to 5 is like every episode something big's gonna happen. There's gonna be some big revelation. There's gonna be some crazy tension, and this is the last moment where you really get a chance to breathe.
This is going to be a hot take. I hate people who don't like Fly. I think that is, I shouldn't say hate, but it's very annoying when people, like, I hear fans or quote unquote fans who are like, yeah, Fly sucked, man. It wasn't a good episode. It was boring. And it's like, and maybe it's because, like, for you and me, maybe it's because our sensibilities are more, The Sopranos, obviously, and that more sort of contemplative storytelling. But Fly, man, I love that episode. It
Yeah.
just encaps the entire idea of the series, or sort of all of Walt's anxieties, or just sort of like that dread that's building. It's just it's communicated in such a very simple
Mm-hmm.
and very huge. Like the chemistry between him and Jesse was excellent, again, you had like a full hour to explore that too. It
Yeah.
wasn't just like a you know scenes here and there, but yeah.
So the one thing that I kind of got a new perspective on, because I did something unique with this Breaking Bad log, which is I invited my audience to like send me what they thought about the episode, and I was going to put that in my review of the episode, because I wanted to see like, okay, I really like this, but I want to hear from other people and be like, what about it makes you hate it besides the fact that it's boring? I don't think that's a good argument, but maybe there is some merit here. And the one criticism people laid, which I kind of get a little bit, is when this show was airing, week by week, and this was the only episode you got for that week. I could see people being a little turned off and being like, they're so used to stuff happening that's before this Hank got shot, right? We're dealing with the aftermath. We're dealing with all this stuff, and to then suddenly be like interrupted kind of feels like you're like, oh, I waited a whole week and this is what I got. But now that it's all available and you can binge watch the whole series, a lot of people are more forgiving of the episode because it's like, okay, I get it because I can immediately watch the next one and I'm not like cut off for a week of wondering, what the hell is going to happen here. So that's the only thing I could see differently. But yeah, I'm with you 100%, man. That's one of the better episodes of the show, in my opinion.
It really encapsulates pretty much in terms of character. It just demonstrates it so
Yeah.
beautifully. And funny enough that you mentioned that, that is actually a good point because I'm currently working on my leftovers
Yeah.
analysis, and this is sort of like a Lindelof thing, which I'm kind of torn on. Lindelof has this habit of sometimes, especially in the leftovers, because he does it twice. The season like ramps up to a very like to a climax, like something like really really big happens, and then of course like the audience is like, yeah, I can't wait for next week to find out what happens. And then what he'll do is he'll pivot to a completely separate plot that kind of, at least in season 1, it's not like it's a good episode, but like right after what happens in the previous episode, you're like, are you fucking kidding me? And then you have to wait another week. And again, like when you're binging it, that's one thing. It's like
Mhm.
whatever. It's like, it works. But oh man, if I had to like wait like 2 full weeks for that, I would be pretty pissed. I get that actually.
It's interesting to look at shows in a different light once they're done. It's we forget about that experience. It's almost like lost history, the experience of watching it week to week. Um, Luckily now there's the internet, and you can go back on like Reddit or people on YouTube, people's reactions. But 30 years from now, people won't remember like the wait between episodes. They won't remember the feeling of like community. They'll just have the full picture of the show, and that will, I think, fundamentally change how certain shows are interpreted.
Hmm.
Game of Thrones is a great example, right? It's like week to week, people
The
were
hype
so into that
train.
thing. Even at the end there, when people were hating it, they were still like, because there's this element of
We
unknown
were
to it, I'm still super invested. Now
we
no
were
one wants
holding
to even
on to
talk
hope.
about it. Yeah, exactly. Now no one wants to even discuss it, or they're like, okay, now that I've seen the whole thing, it's garbage. Fuck it. And that's there's some argument to that.
One of the only shows I can think of that kind of recaptures that magic, it seems, is Better Call Saul. I know you're a fan. I mean, I haven't, obviously I don't know the context. I don't watch
Yeah,
the show. From what I've heard, so it's what 2 episodes have been released of the last 6. From what I've
yeah.
heard, it's been like holy fuck good.
Yes.
Well, you have
I
your
I
thoughts.
have my criticisms of it. That it's interesting because I want to, maybe I should talk to you about this, because this is my first kind of taste of having a significant portion of my audience like disagree with my take.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people do agree with my critic, because I love the show. I don't hate it at all, but I've been very critical of this last season. Like going like, I don't like this beat. I don't like this beat. I think this was executed poorly. Um, and a significant portion of my audience is be like, no, you're wrong. This is really, really good. We love this show. We love these beats. You are not analyzing this correctly. Some people say meaner things than that, but um, and I'm curious how that like, because I imagine, given how like the topics that you deal with, you get that very frequently. Whereas it's kind of new to me. How do you typically like handle that?
Um, I think it's just a matter of just if your argument is if you think your argument is solid and you can back it up, and because like what ends up happening is a lot of people, they'll voice like opinions, like they'll have opinions, but they'll be more sort of like emotion based. It's like this is how I feel about it, but they haven't really
Yeah.
like broken down like, hang on, I felt a certain way about this, but instead of just saying I think this thing is bad because I feel it's bad, like you can feel however you want. But as like yeah, as like a reviewer, as if you're trying to do analysis, your job is to say, okay, what about this isn't working for me? Why doesn't
Yeah.
it work? And then sort of explore it and see and try to like work it out. And sometimes like that's for me, like there have actually been movies where I felt originally like that didn't really work. But then after kind of breaking it down, I was like, oh no, wait a minute. I kind of missed this
Hmm.
nuance. And then I kind
Yeah.
of I changed my mind over it after other rewatches with that in
Yeah.
mind. And vice versa for other movies where I kind of realized after like rethinking an ending, like the ending, I like, oh, this ending, I thought I was great. But then rewatching it, I'm kind of like, actually, I don't know. But if you do that and you have a very, you've really thought out your argument and or your contention and really nailed it down as to like what it is that doesn't you believe doesn't work what you believe doesn't work about it, when people come at you, all you have to do is kind of say, okay, well, you know, counter what I'm saying, like what is the counter to what I am arguing. And usually like for most people, like sometimes they'll have takes because they've done the same thing, but like most times what I get is mostly just like, you're wrong, or it's like you suck. And
Yeah.
but it's funny because like a lot of people ask like, don't those get to you? It's like, no, because they're just like,
Yeah.
if they're resorting to just saying like, oh, you're stupid, or like you interpreted it wrong, but don't actually offer a rebuttal. The thing that pisses me off the most is when I read a comment and I 100% when I read a comment saying I'm wrong about something, and I read the comment and I 100% agree with them, and then I'm like, fuck, that's the worst feeling in the world. But then you kind
uh
of you take a minute, then you're like, actually, know what, you're right, correct. That first little sting, though, it
yeah.
always hurts.
I got that recently because I stand behind all my criticisms that I've made, but some people commented that like it seemed like I was more upset about the community's reaction to the episode than the episode itself. Like the fact that people loved it was pissing me off more than the episode itself because I was disagreeing with those people. And upon reflection, I was like, you know what? I agree with that. I think that's a fair criticism of my reaction. I think I am thinking before I even make the criticism what other people are thinking and being mad at their reaction to it, and that's affecting my review. So I tried to fix that moving forward, but I definitely agree with you that it's not really the comments that call me stupid or call me names or anything that makes me mad. I just laugh at those most of the time. It's the ones that like they're just factually incorrect. Like they said that I said something that I didn't say. Those really fucking piss me off because I'm like, did you even watch the goddamn video? I didn't make this argument. Um, but you know that if you try to even bring that up, it's like they're not gonna. It's not gonna change anything. So you might as well just ignore these people.
um, Funny enough, I think we talked about it last episode, but it's funny you mentioned that because I had like a whole Twitter war with someone. It's like nobody, but like we were talking about. Oh, it was after uh, tweeted that stupid tweet about like Breaking Bad's not about toxic masculinity,
Yeah,
and then I respond kind of like, no, it actually like, clearly is. There's like a lot of scenes that directly involve
yeah.
it, and I got arguing with this other person, and we got talking about Gretchen and Elliot, and then I asked him, it's like, well, the fact that Walt left Gretchen because of her family's wealth, like that's a pretty big indicator as to like what his motivations are throughout the series. Like that is that's one of like the key moments of his character that really shows like what his main drive is through all of this. It's a very small moment, but it's a very sort of like understated moment, but it's very crucial. And he was convinced that Gretchen had cheated on Walt, and that was why he was mad and left her. And then she felt guilty about it, and that is why she wanted to give him the money. And I'm like, what evidence do you have that supports that Gretchen ever cheated on Walt? And he never answered. And I'm just like, and that you were so correct. That pissed me off. I'm just like,
Yeah.
please, just give me something. Like, why would you
There's
possibly think this?
nothing in the narrative that suggests that at all. I mean, people can read into things what they want to, right? Like they can read. You can read subtext that may or may not exist. I think in that case, he was probably just so mad at Skylar for doing that to Walt that
Mhm.
he, in some ways, just conflated that to his feelings about Gretchen, and
Maybe.
probably can take it even further that he was probably thinking about other people in his life too, or something like that. But yeah, there's really nothing in the narrative that could support that. There's no evidence for that. I mean, you could argue that there's no evidence against it either, but that's not the same thing, right?
Or I think my counter was like the scene at the diner when he's talking with Gretchen, and then he's like, and she's like laying out like, bro, what the hell is your problem? And he's like, you guys cut me out of the company,
Yeah,
and you cut me out, and he's like all this like delusional shit. And at the end, he goes like, fuck you. And I'm
yeah,
like, don't you think that
yeah,
if she cheated on him, he would have like said like, you cheating bitch, or like something like he would have probably brought it up. And he also thought that there was an implication that Walt was forced out of gray matter, despite that scene in season 5 where he's like, no, I left on my own accord. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
And I
I mean,
know at that point, I'm like, I know I should stop this because we're not going to go anywhere.
no.
But I'm the same with you. Like, it's that shit that pisses me off. Like, you are just factually incorrect, and I'm so upset.
Dude, people on Twitter are so fucking stupid. And you know what's so funny? Like I follow David Simon, the creator of The Wire, on Twitter. And it's so fucking fascinating to me that the dude literally spends all day long arguing with people who've got like 30 followers on Twitter.
Based.
Like, dude will literally just like sit there for hours. I look through his history, and it's like he'll be arguing about Trump with someone, and I'm like, I, I mean, it's funny, but I'm like, you are like a showrunner of like a dozen critically acclaimed shows. Don't you got something better to do than argue with these retards?
That's
Like,
so based.
seriously?
That's so based, though. I'm
I
gonna
don't
create an
know.
alt account and just um just
Just
pick a
troll
fight.
him.
It's like, yeah, I'm gonna be like, McNulty was a racist or something, and he's gonna be like, what?
I wanted to kind of troll him a little. I wanted to post some like Trump stuff just to troll him, just so he'd respond, so I could be like, David Simon
Hey, I'm
responded to my
interacting with
tweet.
this is my
Yeah.
this is my moment.
Oh man, social media is so fucking weird. Like it brings out such like a weird behavior in people where they will like read into stuff that you like stuff that you even don't say, right? Like if you leave something out, right? They'll read into it that you left it out on purpose and make a judgment about it for you, even though in your mind it's just like, well, it goes without saying this. I don't need to. We all fucking understand it, but I've learned that like nothing goes without saying on the internet. Like if you don't say it, there's an implication to it.
Yeah, that's it's a common tactic. It's not whataboutism, but it's yeah, sort of like if you don't denounce something outwardly, then that means that you like if
Yeah,
you're like I remember like in some context it was like someone was like mad at like this celebrity doing something stupid or like whatever, and then it's like, oh, you're mad at. Oh yeah, no, it was something like you see it all the time. I mean, I guess it is kind of whataboutism, where it's like y'all are mad at this celebrity for doing this, but you didn't get mad at this celebrity for doing this, and it's like, well, A, who says I wasn't mad at that
yeah,
celebrity for doing that? Like now that I didn't know about that, but now that you pointed it out to me, that's pretty shitty. I agree now. But also B, like just because celebrity B did something like worse than celebrity
mm,
A doesn't mean what celebrity A did any less stupid. Like it's just like what point are you trying to make? You're not even like saying I'm wrong. You're just getting
yeah,
mad at like a imagined hypocrisy that you think
yeah.
is what are you mad at, right?
Well, people are they're not trying to like prove that they're right. They're just trying to prove you're wrong. Like that's how people argue on the internet. I don't have to have like a valid argument. I just have to poke holes in yours, and any flaw in your logic, I won because I pointed that out, and therefore everything you said is now incorrect. Even if you said one thing that was incorrect, every other part of your argument is not valid. And that's how people argue.
Yeah, and there's also sort of like a subset of I don't exactly know how to call it, but there's a certain subset of, you know, not really film bros, but like just sort of like people on social media. They have like this very reactionary attitude. It's sort of like what you were and I felt this way myself before, but sort of like how you were talking about with the Better Call Saul thing about how like it wasn't so much that you were mad at the episode, you were mad at people's reaction to the episode.
Yeah,
And that's sort of how I've seen um I've seen a lot of that sort of attitude on Twitter and social media where people will get mad at things, but it's not the thing they're mad at, it's the people's react. So like
yeah,
for example, um you know, uh, I, there was that whole Lightyear thing where there was the gay kiss in the
hmm,
film, and we were all sort of like, me included, were like shitting on like conservatives who were like losing their shit over it, and a lot of people would respond by saying it's like y'all are making fun of them, but like, while Disney like cuts footage from like these movies
Hmm.
overseas. And
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, yeah, fuck Disney for that. But that's not what we're talking about. We're making
yeah,
fun of the people who are losing their mind. We
yeah,
also don't like Disney. Like they like
yeah,
also fuck them. And it was like this weird thing where it's like they almost like perceive it as like, well, if you're making fun of person B, then that means you're like kind of defending person A. It kind of like goes to like
yeah,
what you were talking about. And it's like, no. It's almost like they want to try and they have like this aversion to people who what I guess what they would call like virtue signaling. Like they
hmm,
almost feel like anyone who calls out anything
yeah,
is like virtue signaling, and they have to like point out that like, hey, you're not actually a good person because you didn't.
yeah.
And I don't really get it. Like maybe there's some like pathology behind that, but I'm not sure.
I mean, it's also a reaction to the people who are actually virtue signaling with that film. Like, I saw a tweet of someone who was like defending Lightyear, and so they posted that they had went and seen it like 26 times. Um, Now, I think they had like one of those like movie passes where you could see like one movie a day,
Even
forever
so,
for
bro,
monthly.
what are you
Yeah.
doing?
But no, but this was, I mean, you look at the profile and you're like, you know who this person is. There's someone who supports the ideology that the people who hate the film are against, and therefore is using the film as like a battleground for their ideology. Um, which I think is really fucking stupid. Regardless of what you believe, I think using film on both ends, the people who were offended by that kiss or whatever, it's a fucking movie. It's a boring fucking movie that's not doing well for reasons regardless of that. And it's like you're gonna get mad at this one thing, which I saw was even like it was like 2 frames of a kiss. It was like happening in the background. It wasn't even like a movie about lesbianism or anything like that. And you're and
It
you're gonna
probably would
use
have been
this.
better if there
It
was like
probably
a
would
whole
have been better, yeah.
subplot.
But you're gonna use this fucking kids movie to rile up your whole thing of being like Disney has put out way more woke shit than this movie. But again, they're just using it to further their fucking their battlegrounds.
Well, that's what's so frustrating is that like the people who would like get mad at that. So like if I would say it's like, yeah, these people who are like freaking out over the kiss are like fucking like they're so cringe and stupid. We should absolutely make fun of them. And then you get the people where it's like, yeah, but it's the Disney is like trying to like make it seem like the first gay character and trying to like milk it for dollars and like virtue signaling. And then my response is like, yeah, we should make fun of them too.
Yeah,
We absolutely should. Like all that shit about like Disney. Like I thought it was like an over exaggeration, but no, Disney has literally had countless like they've had like 8 films with the first openly gay Disney character, and you're just like, what are you trying to do
yeah,
here? It's not the movie I'm mad at. Like it's not
yeah,
like the character or anything like that. It's the fact that you are like you're jerking yourself off so fucking hard about it to try and like pander. And
yeah.
then you're right, then you get the people who were like, if you don't like the representation, like if like what was his name when LeFou they tried to like make him a whole thing in the
Mm.
Beauty and the Beast remake about being the openly gay character. And a lot of people rightfully criticize. It's like it's kind of weird that the first openly gay character, even though he was probably like the fourth, he's named his name means the fool, and the only like real indication that he's gay is at the end when he kind of like waltzes with a dude for maybe like 3 seconds.
Yeah,
And it's like no, you can rightfully call that out as like
yeah.
bullshit. But then there were other people who were like, it's like, at least we got something. And it's like, no, you shouldn't like settle for like shit
Yeah.
like that. You should not put up with it. You should absolutely criticize that shit.
Well, it's so funny too watching Disney basically go broke. If you see like the stock prices are like at an all-time low in recent history because of their failures with Lightyear and some other stuff going on. And I think it's so funny that like I mean you can obviously tell that Disney's whole strategy behind the gay kiss was to, you know, be like, get all these people to come watch it because we're supporting the gay community, when you're really not. Again, it was a 2-second thing in the background of a shot. Like, you're taking the easiest fucking route to please these people, but it didn't work out because, people are not stupid, right? They're not gonna go watch your film just because you put this marketing stunt in there. It's not a movie for that. And I like that Disney is rightfully losing money on this, because it's hilarious to watch them kind of get some justice for the lazy kind of storytelling that they've been putting out lately.
Well, that's what's so frustrating is that like you have on one side you have the camp who is like, yeah, the movie is bad because of the diversity. Like they try to like link it together where it's like, well, if they didn't focus so much on diversity, it would be better. And it's like, I don't really think that's the case. I think it's just that the movie sucked. Like
Yeah.
it would have sucked. Like Disney puts out plenty of shit films that like don't have diversity. Like that there are plenty of shit
Almost the
films that
majority of them
yeah.
lately have been shit.
Yeah, it's just that's just how they are. Um, the diversity or none. But then the other side is like, yeah, it's like Disney's like to like the gay community or the LGBT community. It's like, hey, we have like some representation in this film, and they're like, that's cool, but is it like a good movie? And they're like, what does that matter? Like,
Yeah.
it's you got
We
representation,
put it in there. You got to watch. You got to pay us money.
and they're like, no, like that's cool, I guess, but like and also it's just so frustrating when like you try to suck your own cock so hard about
Yeah.
like, hey, we finally have representation, but it's Disney does it so bad. It's like, but here's a 2-second clip that we can absolutely cut out.
Edit. Yeah, for the Chinese
the
market.
the Rise of Skywalker one was just horrible. You ever seen that one where it's just
Hmm.
it's like the main character's hugging and they cut away to just a random shot and then to the two chicks kiss and then it just cut and it's just like, what are you doing? That was like the worst thing I've ever seen. Oh,
The original Star Wars also had a controversial kiss, the
hell
brother and
yeah.
sister kiss. So,
Fuck yeah.
Disney. I mean, Star Wars was ahead of its time with its sexual representation of
Yeah, Disney,
incest.
they were really like George Lucas was really trying to push the envelope, man.
Yeah,
And that Disney really pussied out. Like, oh, we had a lesbian kiss. It's like that's
yeah,
nothing, bro.
that's nothing. It's funny though too, because you do have people like Chris Pine, right, who voiced Buzz Lightyear, um, saying that is it Chris Pine or was it Chris Evans?
Chris Evans.
Chris Evans, sorry. You have him basically saying like the only reason this movie did not succeed is because of bigots who protested the movie because of the gay kiss, and it's like, no, I don't think so. I think, if anything, controversy usually results in more viewings because people are mad about it. The truth is, it's just a shitty movie that Disney's gotten very lazy with its storytelling, thinking it can put out whatever and will succeed. But in this age, like what we talked about in our streaming wars episode, a lot of that stuff has come true. Netflix has lost like 1 million subscribers since then and is going to the paid model. You can't just count on your audience to continue watching in this age where there's so much fucking content available. You actually have to make a good product for people to show up.
I think that's sort of what to kind of like roll it back to what you're talking about sort of like getting uh talking about sort of like water cooler television. Like,
Yeah,
like we what are those shows where it's like everyone watches it and
yeah,
it's like a big thing and there's like this big collective like Game of Thrones. Absolutely, like it was just
yeah,
fun. And
yeah,
like, not to be like too sentimental, but it was one of those things where, because I've talked to people online, but just guys struggling with like dating and social skills and stuff like that.
yeah,
Stuff like that I think is a very good, like something like Game of Thrones.
yeah,
Pick any person off the street, like
yeah,
8 out of 10 of them.
yeah,
If they watch Game of Thrones, hey, there's something you can talk
yeah,
about. There's something you can kind of connect with, and that can get the ball rolling.
yeah.
as opposed to like, hey, do you like soccer? Like, no, like fuck,
No.
and then you walk away. Like, but it's there is uh, sort of a related. My girlfriend is really into going, like, she loves concerts, and I
Mhm.
never really like understood. Like, I'm personally not a big fan of concerts here and
Yeah.
there, but the way she put it was like, what really gets me is that it's just fun to be there with a
Yeah.
group of all these people passionate about the same thing, and
Yeah.
you kind of feel like you're a
Oh yeah.
part of something. And that's kind of how I feel in sort of, like, yeah, I remember when, like, Breaking Bad was airing and everyone
Yeah.
was like, yeah, we're all excited, and that kind of felt cool. It kind of like being like like that sort of club, if you will.
Oh yeah.
Um, and now, but now I'm thinking of it is like nowadays is like you just don't really get that anymore. Here and there,
Yeah.
couple shows, but like even like season 4 of Stranger Things, like
Yeah.
not even that. Mostly, most people are kind of like, yeah, I'll get
Over it.
around to it. Maybe I'll watch it. I don't care, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's I mean that's literally an evolutionary thing, which is like we are designed to want to be a part of the group, because that's ensured that we would basically survive when we were cavemen, and feeling like you're outside the group is a scary thing. It's why high school is such a terrifying time for people, because feeling like an outsider is psychologically terrifying, because in the caveman times that meant you were going to die because the community abandoned you. Um so I totally get that. And yeah, we mentioned that in the water cooler episode, which is, yeah, television provides that for a lot of people. Movies and stuff do. And it's a powerful marketing tool for a lot of these shows and movie studios to be like, again, encouraging that kind of um almost cult like obsession with Star Wars is the greatest fucking example of this in the world, right? Creating a whole idea of like, yeah, buy the lightsaber, buy the fucking baby Yoda backpack, buy the whatever, be a part of this massive fucking global conspiracy to be a part of this fandom. They just forgot to actually make the movies really good like they used to be. Or maybe they tried their best, I don't know, but I'm not the biggest you know in touch with Star Wars. But there's the reason why a lot of people, I think, have the kind of hatred of the franchise they do, is because it feels like the studio is trying to create that in the audience, rather than letting it be like just a natural, organic experience, like the Sopranos community kind of is.
Well, I think I don't know if I said this before, but I forget. I did not make up this quote. Someone else did, and it's a great quote. And it's I feel bad for not crediting it, but someone said, so like going back to, like, Jaws, or actually Star Wars is a better example. What they didn't really understand, or producers, and even to this day, what they don't understand, and the same thing happened with Game of Thrones. Everyone's always looking for the next Star Wars, or hey, what's going to be the next Game of Thrones? What they don't understand is that the next Star Wars is not going to look anything like Star Wars. The next
No.
Game of Thrones is not going to be anything like Game of Thrones. The reason these things took off is because they were unlike anything anyone had ever seen before.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. That's what got people excited. Even stuff like Breaking Bad, even Sopranos, like all these things are like, what's the common denominator? It was nothing like you had seen before.
Mm.
And the produce, like, they don't get it. Like, I
No.
understand they want to just like capitalize, but like when they're really trying to, like, oh, we really want to find something, big and new, and it's like, then why is your criteria for that just a hodgepodge of all the other
Yeah.
successful shows that came out over the last 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
It's like game, yeah, it's like, oh, the Lord of the Rings, Amazon's gonna be like the next Game of Thrones. It's like, no, it's fucking not, because you're gonna
No.
try and make it too much like Game of Thrones. We're all gonna say, hey, this show is trying way too hard to be Game of Thrones, and we're not gonna watch it.
No. There's no soul. I mean, we talked about that in one of our episodes too. It's like they're making it for all the wrong reasons. It's
Mhm.
it's made for monies. I mean, everything's made for money, but there's no original passion that's driving this thing forward. Um, and if I had to wager what I think the next big thing will be, like genre wise, I think it'll be something sci-fi, but not Star Wars. Like just looking back at where we are and where we're kind of headed. I think if I had to like make a bet or something, I think something sci-fi because we're dealing with like technology. Like Star Wars is science fantasy, really. It's not really like sci-fi. We've not had a groundbreaking science fiction show that like captured the imagination of the public since really like Star Trek, like the original or Next Generation series. It's not really been a thing. There's been some here and there that kind of work, but um, I would bet that probably something in that genre will get pretty big if it had the passion and the soul to go along with it.
Yeah, I have an hour pilot for a sci-fi show. If anyone's
Fuck yeah,
watching,
dude.
give me that moolah, bitches. No, it's kind of a
It's about two podcasters who, but it's in the future, and all the lights are neon lights, and it always rains in the city.
that's sci-fi is such a weird animal for television, man. Like I've heard
Uh,
good things about The Expanse, but I remember I think I read the pilot script and I think I watched the first episode and I just didn't like it. It just felt too unfocused for me.
is that how
Now,
you watch shows for the first time? You read the script?
I don't know why it was at the time I was oh no, I think I was actually it was after a contest and one of the guys in the contest it was the that I entered my sci-fi script and he was talking about we were talking about it and he was like, "Yeah, if you can find other sci-fi scripts and try to read them." And of course, there aren't that many really sci-fi television shows, like not really. There's The Expanse, there's do you remember that extant it's that remember that Halle Berry show that was like on NBC?
No
Now I'll send
idea.
it to you. I'll like send you the link after on
Okay.
Twitter. But like it was like a Halle Berry show. Like she was like her first like big TV role. And it was about this woman who like comes back from a she's been up in space for like 18 months
Mm,
and she finds out she's pregnant. And like it was like a solo mission, and then she found out she's pregnant, and then of course there's a big conspiracy, and then it gets fucking weird.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, I don't think it was very good. But the pilot was very
Mm,
like I saw why it was successful because it was very like um what's what I'm looking for? Very a lot of cliffhangers, very
yeah.
sort of like get like, capture your attention. There wasn't much
Yeah.
substance, but I could see why it would make for like a good like ABC or NBC show.
Like I said, we had like the renaissance of science fiction in like the 80s or whatever. You got or 60s to 80s. Like you got Star Trek, you had Twilight Zone, which had that kind of sci-fi element to it, but really it drops off from there. Or, Blade Runner and stuff like that too. But it now it seems like a lot of shows are trying to touch onto that genre more and more. And you've got some mid-list shows that like Rick and Morty, Black Mirror, shows that are touching on that pastiche, um, but I don't think have again captured that kind of cultural imagination that defines like a show like what we're talking about, like Game of Thrones, that literally everyone and their mothers was sitting down every week to watch. You don't see that with any of these kind of shows yet, but like I said, maybe we could see that in the future here.
Yeah, well, sci-fi is tricky. Again, it's tricky for television because well, I've heard good things about Dark, the German
The
show. It's
show
on
is all
Netflix.
right, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard. I've some like it's weird because some people say like it's amazing, and other people are like meh. The hard thing about I think what makes sci-fi so difficult for television is because sci-fi I think works really well with movies
Yeah,
because you can take a simple premise like hey an android comes back to try and
yeah.
kill the leader of a rebellion, Terminator. Uh, two guys discover time travel and shit goes nuts. Primer or Back to the Future or have you take the simple premise and then sort of like and that's how I think sci-fi works best. Like I
Yeah.
made a video on Looper and why I
Mm,
don't like it. And I think it's because sci-fi works best when you take one thing,
yeah.
one element, like, hey, what if you could time travel? What if you could, you know, whatever, and you explore that and you kind of develop it and see where it leads you. But the problem is, and this is an issue I have with a lot of sci-fi movies, but particular TV shows, is that because you need to continue to make up new ideas, you kind of have to, by necessity, invent like sort of like new sci-fi technologies. Because
Yeah.
I like, how could you make a 5 season show where the only about time travel? Like, I mean, you
Yeah.
could, but like if that's the only thing, it's probably gonna get old. So what ends up happening is they start off with something interesting, like, oh, we discovered time travel.
Hmm.
But then they start like introducing like weird ass shit, like, oh, actually there's aliens, or like, oh, there's
Yeah.
alternate universes. And like, and then it just becomes, like you were saying, it just becomes more like fantasy. It becomes kind of,
Yeah.
it feels like it feels just silly, because now you're
Yeah.
throwing out, it was like this, like sci-fi, at least for me, is cool when it's like grounded. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
this one thing happens, like aliens come to Earth, or like we
Hmm.
invent time travel, and everything else has to adjust to it. But then
Yeah.
in other shows, it's just like you throw out like 50 million things, like, whoa, there's
Yeah.
like lasers, whoa, there's aliens, and then it's just like what even am I watching at this point?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough thing to write into. I mean, it's also expensive to shoot because you have to make the world basic. It can't just look like our world, or people will be like, "What is science fiction about this?" Even though really the future is going to look like our world too. We're just people are going to be sitting in their rooms. They're just computers. Are just going to be 100 times faster. That's the
It's
most realistic, future imaginable.
it's so funny you mentioned that, and I don't mean to. I am not, just for people, just because I'm waiting for it, and I don't mean to hate on it. I am not saying it's bad. However, one really negative consequence of the success of Blade Runner
Hmm.
is that I think a lot of people, when they think of science fiction, they think of it more as like an aesthetic
Oh
than
yeah, the
the actual.
cyberpunk aesthetic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like when we talk about Blade Runner, the actual sci-fi has nothing to do with like the look, with like
Hmm.
it, like, not really. It's more about, hey, what if androids existed, and like what, and it
Yeah.
asks questions about consciousness and humanity. Like that's like the meat and potatoes. But unfortunately, it's for some people, for some fans, I think they focus too much on like the aesthetic,
Hmm.
and like, because I've seen a lot of like sci-fi movies and sci-fi shows that are just so, they say they're sci-fi, but then it's like a drama that has like a sci-fi
Neon
aesthetic.
lights.
Yeah, and it's just like, this isn't science. This is like an action film. This is just an action film, like set like 50 years in the future, and you put chrome on everything, and there's flying
Yeah.
cars. Like that's not
It's not
sci-fi.
sci-fi now.
Yeah, like Back to the Future is like, at least to me, like more sci-fi,
Oh yeah.
even though it takes place in the 50s, because it's not about like the setting, it's not about the aesthetic, it's about
Hmm.
what is the narrative device that is being at play. And I think, and again, I'm not
Yeah.
hating on Blade Runner for it. It's not Blade Runner's fault,
Yeah.
but I do think that people, it did have a negative consequence on people's
Oh
perception
yeah.
of what is considered sci-fi.
Well, it's the same way that like Lord of the Rings and Tolkien pretty much defined what all fantasy would look like
Hmm.
afterwards, and that's why a lot of fantasy fans they don't hate Lord of the Rings, but they hate all the stuff that came afterwards because it like made the genre stagnant. And when we're talking about aesthetics, I feel the same way a little bit about Game of Thrones, that it kind of made all fantasy shows afterwards look like it too.
Yep.
It's not entirely Game of Thrones' fault. Game of Thrones was kind of following like the Dark Knight, again, taking it back to the Dark Knight, this kind of realism that has defined pretty much the look and feel of like all media since then, where it's just like all the armor has to be like dark and realistic, and you can't have like colorful capes and stuff anymore, or cloaks or anything, because it'd be realistic. We got to have everyone be wearing like black colored clothes. And I hate that fucking aesthetic in fantasy, because you like the art in the books, the armor is supposed to look all like ornate. These rich nobles would have like blue armor or green armor or golden armor or whatever, because they're rich and they want to be fancy. But the show made everyone dress in these drab kind of colors because that's modern realism. And every show has been kind of copying Game of Thrones since then. So
That's a great point.
um, I even this latest House of the Dragon looks like it's doing the same exact thing. Um, which I got some thoughts about that upcoming show, but maybe that'll be a discussion for another time.
Yeah, I'll probably watch it. Damn it!
Oh, I
It's like
will too.
someone on my Discord was like, "Hey, are you gonna buy The Last of Us
Oh, I saw
Part
your
One
comment
remake?"
about that today.
And I'm
Yeah,
like, "Yeah, probably." And I'm not gonna be happy about it, and I'm not gonna enjoy. I mean, I like the game and the story, but I'm not gonna enjoy the experience because I'm gonna be like, I paid $70 for this, and
yeah,
I'm just it's the exact same shit.
same exact thing. And I mean,
Well, it's a catch
good.
22 because with The Last of Us, like the narrative is so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
If they change anything about the narrative, I'm gonna be fucking pissed because like what are you doing? This is like it's like changing The Godfather.
Yeah,
But on the other hand, if they don't change anything, on one hand, I'm gonna be like, well, thank God. But also now I'm pissed because I could have
why did I
just
buy it?
I have it on PS3 and PS4, and now I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a fucking simp.
Well, I mean, you and me look at it differently too, because I'm gonna watch that like House of the Dragon partially because I'm gonna react to it as the episodes come out, and that's content that my viewers can check out. So I think you and me sometimes think about these things differently, which is that like even if it's bad, at least I've got something to kind of like criticize and like make a video out of in this case.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing reactions to it. We'll see. We'll see if I have this. Maybe I'll like watch the pilot and then if I see if I have the stomach for it.
Yeah.
Um, Funny enough, kind of just going back a bit, sort of like an alternate story. Um, when you're talking about sort of like people misinterpreting,
Hmm.
like the talking about like the ornate colors, like when they look back at like when they're trying to recreate history, they sort of have to put it through the lens of like modern sensibilities.
Yeah.
Um, there's a perfect example of that in the film Gladiator with Russell Crowe. Came out
Yeah.
like shit, like 22 years now. Roger Ebert in his review was talking about, um, or maybe it was Robert Ebert, I'm not sure, but basically in the Gladiator scenes. So when the gladiators come out and fight, originally in the script, and this is historically accurate, there were like scenes of vendors in like the Roman Colosseum coming out and advertising products.
Yeah.
Like, hey, like try this new like fabric or these pots or
Yeah.
something. And that was actually a thing. They would actually do that in the Colosseums before the gladiator fights.
Yeah.
And the the writers and creators, producers, they cut it because they didn't think people would believe it.
Yeah.
They thought that if they saw that, that would be like, oh, why
Yeah.
this is so like unrealistic. Like this would
truth
never.
truth is
They
stranger or truth is stranger than fiction.
It really is. Like it was very funny how it can be this thing where like, no, this is historically correct, but it just doesn't like it just feels
Yeah.
wrong. And they so like,
Well,
oh, we'll cut it. But
did you see Rome, the HBO show?
I never did. I've heard good things
Okay,
though.
really good, dude. But in that series, there's like this like recurring announcer guy, like a town crier, who like reads out the news every day. And at the end of when he'd read out the news, he'd be like, "Today's news is brought to you by the Guild of Millers, true Roman bread for true Romans." Like it had like a slogan to it too. Um, like ancient Rome was fucking weird like that. And um, again, we tend to when we look at those Roman things, we tend to like represent them like colorless, like white marble. That's the kind of image that people have of Rome. But that's how they look nowadays. If you actually went back to ancient Rome, all those statues were fucking painted. It was a colorful city. Um, there's this great detail in the show that's real life too. There's like dick drawings on all the walls. Like the ancient Romans fucking loved dick drawing. It was so funny to them. They would graffiti dicks on all the walls, and make jokes about people's dicks, and they'd have like people would wear like fake dicks, and it was funny to them.
And now everyone thinks it's like, no, they were all serious philosophers and just
No,
like walking very solemnly. Like, no, they were fucking
no,
each other wild in the bathhouses,
yeah,
bro.
and it's so funny too to just again to see that how we represent these shows again. It comes down to our modern sensibilities, and I worry that that's something that's going to be a problem with the House of the Dragon. Is like, are they going to be faithful to the material again, or are they going to change it to be like we want this conflict to be about like feminism or race or whatever, because they've cast one of the houses like black people, and I worry that that could ruin this show. I wouldn't say it quite ruined Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones problems were much deeper than that, but that was a problem, especially at the later seasons of the show, as like it became much more about like modern politics than the actual politics of the show.
Yeah, well, it's funny because Lindsay Ellis did a great analysis of it, and she. So my main problems as to why I think Game of Thrones failed is obviously just D&D or just fucking idiots. Uh, but beyond that, aside from that, the main issue I think was that they tried to make it too. There was too much of a Hollywood influence. So, for
Yeah.
example, the like if you read the books, Jon Snow really isn't a better example is Tyrion and
Yeah.
Dany. But
Oh
in the
yeah.
show, in the books, Jon isn't really he's not a hero, but he's also not a hero. Like he's sort
Yeah.
of like especially where we are in the books right now, like his like in the show his handling of the wildlings is like sort of like he's sort of like this peacekeeper, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm like the chosen one and I'm going to like bring us all together.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, it's a bit more sketch. He's a bit more, no, I am a commander and I have to
Yeah.
sort of like lay down the law and make sure we don't kill each other. But it's not done in really like a heroic, like you
No.
inspired us way. It's more of like a, we're in a, like spoilers for the books the, in the show, it's implied that like the whole thing like of John like being murdered by Alistair and the others, it comes off as more of like a personal grudge thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, when they stab John, they actually have
They have
it's
just
written,
cause.
they have like tears in their eyes when they're doing
Yeah.
it because they're doing it because hey, we think that you're based on our oath, you're doing the wrong thing. It's supposed to
Yeah.
show that John kind of fucked up. Whereas in the show, it's
Yeah.
just hey, bad guy, good guy, and
Yeah.
that like
Exactly.
that entire sort of like those sensibilities run throughout the entire latter half of the series, and I
Yeah.
think that was beyond again just shit writing. That
Yeah.
I think is one of the biggest reasons that it all failed.
And I worry that they're gonna take the wrong lessons from Game of Thrones when it comes to someone like Rhaenyra, who is going to be one of the main characters of the House of the Dragon. And based on what people's reaction to Dany was, of like this kind of woman who goes insane, there were so many critiques again of the writing in general, and then of like a feminist angle where it was like, you've made this woman character essentially just a hysterical villain. Um i i worry that they're going to be like, okay, we can't make Rhaenyra as complicated as she is in the book. She's got to be a good person, because otherwise they'll say we're just pulling another Dany.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens to Dany in the show is accurate to the books. I just think it was rushed, and you didn't lay out the proper foundation for this. But I do think it's where her character is headed.
Absolutely. And also they removed fake on, which I think
Yeah,
is I like in my video on Barristan I talk or Varys
yeah,
we talk about how he's actually a very essential piece of the puzzle, and removing him kind of fucks
yeah,
up a lot of shit. But whether he's real or fake. But I think, and it kind of goes back to the whole hero thing. Another big issue is that the framing of Dany in the show is this like, hey, she's a good, she's the good queen. She's a just
yeah,
queen. Her methods may be, brutal, but she's like got a good heart and she's doing the
yeah,
right thing and she's the hero for the most part.
yeah,
It's very similar to like Jon Snow. There's kind of
yeah,
more of a, a good guy aesthetic. Whereas in the book, it's more of a, you're kind of not sure. Because again,
yeah,
but in a way, it makes her so much more of a complex character because here's like this young girl, she's being thrust into like this brutal world, and after she acquires the dragons, she realizes this young girl who has been basically abused her entire life, all of a sudden she's given this unlimited power.
mm-hmm.
And you kind like a good example is like aside from even the slavers, um and Marine, when she kills the slavers of Astapor, in the book it's sort of this, Like, obviously, we're like, well, fuck those guys. Who cares? Like, it's not
Yeah,
about them. Like, fuck them. It focuses more on like, how is this going to affect Danny? Like, is this going
yeah,
to like again? Like, fuck them. It's very similar to the scene in the show when John beheads Janos Slint.
yeah,
What I the, the scene in the show I actually like because it kind of like no one cares that Janos Slint died.
yeah.
Good,
No,
fuck him. But the reaction, it kind of zoomed in on John's face to kind of it's less about Janos Slint. It's
yeah.
more
It's more
about
about
how
him.
is this going to affect John? Is it going to turn him into a darker character? They totally botched it. They didn't do anything with it.
No,
But that is sort of that is because that could have just been easily like, hell yeah, he killed
yeah,
Janos. But no, it's actually like, yeah, like, fuck Janos, like he killed him, but like, is this going to have some like negative repercussions on John? And that's kind of the entire book with Danny. It's like, hey, even if she's doing like shit you agree with, is she doing it for the reasons you agree with? Is her, ideology kind of flawed? And is that going to eventually lead to bad outcomes? And it's stupid because it makes her so much more interesting in the book.
hmm,
And then the show, and like God bless Amelia Clark, she did so well, but they just did not communicate that at all visually. They made her too much of a like slay queen, like
yeah.
kill him, and it's like,
Yeah, I
not so
just saw an
much.
article the other day that said that she had like two brain aneurysms, and it's
Yeah,
like missing chunks of her. That's crazy. That, oh my god, so that could
and I
happen
had
to
the
someone.
like of the sweetest person, like everything,
Yeah,
like of all like celebrities, like all this shit, and you hear that shit about him. I have never heard a bad thing. Like she is always seemed
yeah.
like an absolute sweetheart, incredibly compassionate, and the fact that, you know,
All the actors I think on the show, did their best job with the material, and I think they're all really fantastic actors. I think just in general, the writing and the direction they were given was oftentimes not up to par with the material they were expected to carry. And I think that no matter what happens, House of the Dragon is not going to be Game of Thrones. Like, it's not going to capture the public's imagination in the way the original Game of Thrones did. Because even if it's great, even if it's fantastic, it's just like we've been here before. I don't even think Better Call Saul captures people the way Breaking Bad did, where it's like, yeah, people are into it, but you talk about the millions who watched Breaking Bad. I mean, millions probably still watch it. Like the ratings are probably still the same, but having the whole world just revolving around this, no, we've been here, and we need, again, like we've been harping on, we need something new with soul to capture the public's imagination again.
absolutely. And sort of a weird example, but so Martin Scorsese, he made Goodfellas in 1990, and then he made
Yeah,
Casino in 1995. Now, if you've seen both Casino and Goodfellas, you'll know that aesthetically they're very similar in
very
terms
similar.
of
Yep.
their style. Now, obviously, Goodfellas is sort of like it was the groundbreaking film. This was the
Yeah.
film that no one had seen anything like it.
No.
And it's even to this day is considered one of the most groundbreaking films of all time.
Yeah.
Now, Casino it's still an excellent film, and so from what I've actually read from a lot of critics, they actually argue that from a completely objective standpoint, Casino is the quote unquote better film in terms of, um, sort of just the filmmaking, the narrative depth, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is technically a better film.
Yeah.
Like if you were to put them side by side. However, you can't you can't capture
Mm-hmm.
that lightning in a bottle or
No.
like that like just breaking the glass ceiling when it came to. And I think Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is very similar in the sense that, at least from what I've read, a lot of people think that whether you think one is better than the other, what I've at least read up on is that Better Call Saul takes more, I don't know how to put it. It takes more sort of, it's more, I guess, like tempered in its storytelling. It's more contemplative, kind of like bordering, Sopranos level.
Yeah.
And again, I'm someone who's never watched it, but this is what I've heard.
Yeah.
They say the directing and cinematography is a lot more mature,
Very
and like
good. Yeah.
you can tell it's just a lot higher production. However, will it ever get to that level of, even if you can, even if it ends and say like Better Call Saul is a better show than Breaking Bad, if we're putting it side by side, will it ever capture that feeling of like when season 5 was airing and that last run of episodes, and like we were all just like freaking out, and it was just, and Ozymandias came out and we were like, holy fucking shit.
Nope.
I don't think it will. I hope it does. I
Yeah.
like for you guys, but I don't think it will. That was a once in a lifetime sort of thing.
No, and it'll never be like it was. We always keep chasing the nostalgia of like that's why remakes and prequels are so like they're so fucking common. This is we're always trying to get back to that place we were. But like you said, we like you said before, like the best thing that's going to come out, we haven't seen it yet. It's not been thought up yet. It's going to be something that we didn't even know we wanted. But once we see it, we'll know that we've been wanting it the whole time.
Um, if to sort of just end on like a positive note, going up back to, we're talking about sci-fi. If you haven't seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, that is a film that we saw and we had heard good things about it, but when you see it, you're just like, you can't. We have to rewatch it. When we saw it in theaters, we didn't really know what to expect, and this was a film of like, some people have like different opinions on it. It's been widely acclaimed. I think it could possibly win Best Picture next year, which would be unbelievable. Um, but it's a film where you can really tell there was so much passion in it, and there was so much creativity and so much energy, and like it, whether you think it, like whether it's your thing or not, just seeing that level of like passion and fun and energy was like, it's very nice to see nowadays.
I need to. You've recommended that film to me before, so I need to check it out. And yeah, just wrapping things up here. I like that we kind of got onto Game of Thrones because it reminded me of our first podcast that we ever did back on my channel. And we spent a very good chunk of it talking about Game of Thrones, and um, we didn't know each other before that, and we didn't know each other really afterwards. But I still think it was like there was something here in our interaction that I was like, this works. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast with you because like one, I think we both again we both we're similar channels, right? We're film and television primarily review channels. But beyond just that, I think you and me in particular, like just the way we see things and the way we see and analyze these franchises and these shows, like it just really meshes well. Like we don't agree on everything point by point, but like the intention is there. Like we get the intention, which is to take it back to the comments from the beginning. It's like we get the message behind what we're saying, even if there's might be specific parts we don't agree with.
Yeah, we're really, I think we're really in tune in terms of what are we looking for when we're trying, like what is it that draws us to certain media. And I think you put it well earlier, it's that we just want to see, we want to know that this is like a, it doesn't have to be, doesn't even necessarily have to be like super original. Like again, a movie that I always go back to is Whiplash. Like that was a movie that it wasn't really, it wasn't necessarily original. It was in some ways, but like the story itself was sort of, pretty conventional. But it was just a movie where like you could just tell that there was just so much energy and just passion in it. And when you see that, as opposed to other pieces of media, where even if they're like well produced or well made, if you kind of feel like there's some sort of like call it in vibe, whether it's in terms of, it's like, oh, you can kind of tell that this show is trying to capture the feel of this movie, or like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That for me is just a huge turnoff because it's just, you're trying to be something else instead of being what you want it to be. And whenever I see a piece of media like that nowadays, even if it's not, and I think you're the same way, even if it's something that I'm not like, I vibe with, like it's not like my thing usually, to just see something like original like that, And again, not necessarily narratively, but just more like the feeling of it. Like this is something where like you can tell the filmmaker put it, their whole heart and soul into, and you could tell that it wasn't trying to be anything else. It was just it just went like that. For all my things I don't like about him, that's kind of what I like about Tarantino. He's like, this is a Tarantino film, and sit down and like it. Whether you like it or not, it's gonna be that. And I'm like, you know what? Fair enough. I'd rather that than a director trying to. This is gonna be the next, movie that I've seen 100 times. It's like, great, thank you so much.
It's got soul, spelled SOVL.
Yes, and like that's sort of like an X factor. It's like when people
Yeah,
say that, like, what do you mean by that? Like, is that tangible? And it's like, I don't know. I think it's just something where it's like the movie magic sort of thing. It's just
yeah.
if it's there, if you see it, it's there, and it's something you have to feel, not something you can really put your finger on.
Well, we definitely have the magic here in this podcast. So
Damn right.
we're over time here. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Mac, for joining me as always. And stay tuned for the next episode of No One's a Critic coming soon.
Take care, y'all.